Avalanche, Chapter 4, The Sage, the Shrine, and the Sacred Object. In the previous chapter, I presented some initial material on the multiplicity of beingness and included hints about how to access the resources contained in the separate selves. In this and the next two chapters, I will explore the theme of induction, how induction can be used to gain such access, and how it can be brought about through various persons and processes, including, number 1, spiritual teachers, religious figures, and elders. Number 2, sacred places. Number 3, images and objects. Number 4, imagery and meditation. Number 5, collective or group meditation. Number 6, ritual work, rites of passage and initiations. And number 7, crisis. Each of these methods represents a powerful pathway into expanded consciousness, regardless of whether one experiences the results simply in terms of expanded consciousness itself or in terms of access to different selves. When such an induction occurs, one is fundamentally altered and has access to profoundly different interior resources. The ordinary sense of self tends to dissolve, sometimes permanently, as in the case of rites of passage, and sometimes temporarily, as when sources of sudden wisdom, clarity, healing, or general information are inducted. I want to emphasize that permanently entering any expanded state of consciousness is not necessarily advantageous. Most of the people for whom I have respect who regularly deal with these states recognize the importance not only of the expanded levels of awareness, but also of ordinary levels. They recognize the worth of using expanded levels to gain counsel or access to resources for the needs of a particular moment, and they also understand the value of celebrating life and its mystery on the level of the everyday and the mundane. They perceive the ideal, ongoing state as being inclusive and not exclusive. The outer mind, the ego, is not a mistake. It does have a role. It has a function in the larger community of selves that make up the beingness of each person. Centering. Another point I want to note emphatically in this context is the importance of centering, of being able to enter an expanded sense of self that is interiorly based, calm, clear, transparent to disruptive forces, and that relates one to transpersonal or transcendental resources. It should not be confused with the rigid, mentally based, non-emotional, invulnerable, defended outer mind state, which is often regarded as centered. The best example I know of a centered state is the expanded awareness of an awakened heart center. The heart center is associated with an anterior lower chest area of the body, and in the East is referred to as the fourth chakra, or the heart chakra. The attributes associated with the awakened heart center are unconditional love, innate harmony, healing presence, and compassion. It doesn't matter whether one learns to achieve a centered state of consciousness through pathways of religious orthodoxy or through those of personal meditation and contemplation. It is only important that one is able to access some state of consciousness that has the capacity to take on the larger dimensions of being without reactivity or imposing inappropriate value systems. And the heart chakra state of awareness is capable of just that. Meditative exercises that can stimulate and develop the quality of heightened awareness are fully described in Joy's way. What do I teach in my foundational workshops? I teach centering. What do I teach in my advanced workshops? I teach centering. What would I teach in my advanced workshops? If I had any, I would teach centering. I can't stress enough the importance of the capacity to center at a transpersonal level. Without this fundamental development in awareness, that is, if the ability to enter at a heart chakra-like level is not established, most expanded resources are either unavailable or can be missed. Hitler and Jim Jones are good examples of individuals who had access to heightened states of consciousness and who were unable to handle the attendant powers. The modulating influences of the feminine and of the heart center apparently were not available to them. The daily and sometimes moment-by-moment practice of centering is what marks the individual who is awakening into a balanced process of transpersonal development. Until centering is mastered, little can be done to direct the rich resources of the deep psyche, and unfortunately, without some kind of training or discipline, most people, when stressed, will regress psychologically to an earlier developmental phase. This is especially evident if the frightened child self gains control of the feelings and the awareness. The more mature, more expanded experiences in life are simply beyond the resources of the child and the outer mind. Centering is also necessary when entering the deeper aspects of the unconscious for purposes of self-realization. This entry is a journey into the soul and can be fraught with psychological dangers. To enter expanded awareness is not safe, even with centering techniques, but the dangers are minimized when such techniques are used. Undertaking the interior journey is as difficult as entering one of the world's large cities and attempting to integrate all of its myriad aspects without making judgments, without making comparisons, and without needing to understand. There must be no tendency to deny or to assume responsibility for what is encountered. An ability to be open to the suchness and the deeper wisdoms of life is required, because the inner environment is so vast and probably infinite, and because one can encounter what may appear to be alien forces that hold very different appreciations of life, death, and the mystery. The need for centering must be firmly understood and the ability to do it established. As far as I can ascertain, in all the world's mystery schools, where students learn to enter and handle the larger dimensions of beingness, a special image or symbol is memorized and contemplated as an aid in centering. The image must be that of the Buddha or of Christ or Mohammed. It may be a mandala, a dot in the center of a circle, a cross. With time and practice, the centering image becomes more and more capable of bringing about a centered state of awareness. What's important is that something be established and available for the individual to use for centering, no matter what is happening in either the outer or the inner levels of beingness. I usually suggest that beginners use one of the traditional images, probably that of a spiritual personage, and that they work with this image for 5 to 10 minutes twice a day when their lives are relatively calm, and as often as necessary when they are not. The force of induction. The power of the image or symbol to bring about change in one's state of consciousness involves a phenomenon of great power and importance. It is an aspect of the phenomenon of induction. The word induction means to introduce or to initiate, to lead. It also has another important meaning related to the phenomenon of electrodynamic induction in physics, in which a current is created in one electrical conductor when it is brought near another conductor in which the current is flowing. This analogy can be applied to experiences we have with certain people and in certain places. Induction occurs with me, for example, when I sit in the presence of a great personage or a spiritual teacher. It is what happens to me when I enter sacred places, such as ancient temples or great cathedrals. These people and their places are capable, through induction, of bringing me into the heightened dimension of consciousness that is somehow in and around them. It is as if they emanate a field of consciousness that has the power to stimulate an equivalent field in anybody or anything near or in them. Induction by spiritual teachers, religious figures, elders. When the deepest levels of consciousness are approached, an example such as Christ or a Buddha may be required. Such persons point the way, bringing one to a threshold of new possibilities that the outer mind by itself simply cannot imagine. They operate as initiators into the grander, deeper possibilities of life. The individual seeking spiritual development must feel for and directly experience the dimensions of awareness and beingness behind the teacher's personality or ordinary self. Often, these exalted figures are perceived as deified parents, which may initially be helpful, but cannot move the seeker beyond mother-father-child patternings of the deep psyche. The situation in which seekers want a god or a goddess to parent them, or where teachers need to parent others, eventually arrests spiritual development in most people. The problem with the parental images that dance us daily, images of the father or mother, religious figures, political leaders, physicians, law enforcement officers, etc., is that each of us, in relation to those parenting images, unconsciously continues to play the child. In ordinary day-to-day experiences, our relationship with our actual parents has a very powerful influence over us, even as adults. Just observing our own behavior when visiting one or both parents will bring this realization quickly to mind. At an unconscious level, we take on, to various degrees, the role of child in relation to the parent. The parent or parents simply aren't going to be anything else but mother and father. They aren't going to act out the lover or teacher or bank loan officer roles, which would induct us into other selves. They're going to act out mother and father, which means that we will find ourselves relating to them very differently than we would to personal friends. There is usually too much secondary gain for us not to engage these individuals as parents. Unfortunately, therefore, they stay parents and we stay children, sometimes very rebellious and angry children. The forces I am talking about are powerful and are contained in the deep unconscious aspects of our being. So just gaining a cognitive insight into the dynamics of the process doesn't really amount to real maturation and development. To break the parent-child forces inevitably requires the sacrifice of the child, and that is not easily accomplished, particularly if the dynamics are unconscious. However, in Chapter 6, with the material on rites of passage, I will offer some suggestions as to how this critical and difficult process may be handled. In the early stages of spiritual awakening, no harm is incurred in playing out parent-child dynamics. To be dependent on the teacher in those stages, perhaps even completely dependent, may be appropriate, with the dependency diminishing as maturation occurs. In later stages, however, the deeper initiations cannot transpire and the fullness of being is lost if the parent-child bonding is not broken. An inclusive path must include not only the child, but also the adolescent, the mature man, the mature woman, the father, the mother, the elder, the teacher, the cosmic one, the self-source, and many more selves as well. All these aspects are to be experienced in some degree in the fuller awakening of being. Therefore, select the guru, master, teacher, or religious training as carefully, as consciously as you are able. The appropriate teacher will open the doors and initiate you just through his or her presence, through the aura you sense around the individual. Often the actual words spoken by the teacher are secondary or minimally important. Just hanging out with a heightened being is enough. Silence is enough. Teachers may have times when the heightened self is present and operating through them, and times when less heightened selves are present. Someone who maintains only the heightened sense of awareness may not be as fully developed as someone who engages the full range of beingness, including the simple self. If you want the induction into heightened possibility from teachers, then encounter them when they are heightened, but also appreciate the ranges they present when they are not heightened. In addition, recognize that some aspects of heightened awareness are antithetical to life and to livingness, and that not all transpersonal aspects include an ability to appreciate the ordinary and the simple. I'm going to read this last sentence again, as it seems important. In addition, recognize that some aspects of heightened awareness are antithetical to life and to livingness, and that not all transpersonal aspects include an ability to appreciate the ordinary and the simple. From an esoteric point of view, the 12 apostles of Jesus can be regarded as representing 12 different aspects or qualities of consciousness making up the being called Christ. The term Christ itself designates the transcendental aspect that organizes and harmonizes the various selves of Jesus. Thus, the psychological makeup, the inner beinghood of Jesus, is seen as consisting of 12 separate selves. Among the many implications of this is the fact that Judas is not separate from Jesus, but actually represents one of the shadow aspects or disowned aspects of Jesus, one that doubts, betrays, and can destroy itself, as well as those who are in association with it. We can therefore appreciate that a teacher, guru, or spiritual guide is not independent of his or her parts. Personal beingness, whether one's own or that of a teacher, is made up of all the parts, and not just the good or preferred or acceptable parts. The inner community, a term I often use when referring to the interior selves, is part of who and what I am, and is not separate from or other than who and what I am. Further, such is the mystery that each of us individually already has all the selves we must have in order for the needs of our particular life to be met. This has nothing to do with our individual perceptions of fairness or equality. It has to do with uniqueness and with life's deeper intentions. Each of us has been given a unique combination of physical elements called a body. No ranting, raving, or jumping up and down and complaining will change this given. Modifications can be made, but fundamentally we are dealt a body, and that's that. The same is true for our psychological patterns. I feel that at the moment of conception, each of us is given a unique combination of both physical and psychological patterns that serve us for a lifetime. They are givens and cannot be anything other than what they are. How we play out the hand dealt determines the quality and fulfillment we are to experience in life. To appreciate what we have and to bring from it the best we can is the only requirement in spiritual unfoldment. To appreciate what we have and to bring from it the best we can is the only requirement in spiritual unfoldment. Big problems arise when we ask ourselves to be what we are not or cannot be. It is life that incarnates us. It needs us. We find peace when we take our place in the larger mystery play, appreciating that life is dancing us, has dealt to us the various combinations that will ensure its continuity and its creativity, no matter what the outer, more self-centered more self-centered sense. Let me start the sentence again. We find peace when we take our place in the larger mystery play, appreciating that life is dancing us, has dealt to us the various combinations that will ensure its continuity and its creativity, no matter what the outer, more self-centered sense of self has to say about the matter. Each aspect of self is important to the mystery play, whether it be the whore, the saint, the child, the teacher, the truck driver, the president, the lover, the warrior, the peacemaker, the mother, the father, the black sheep, the betrayer, or any other from among those endless variety of immortal possibilities. The great spiritual and political viewpoint of the West is that we are all equal and are all capable of developing into the same end product. Anybody who bothers to examine the facts can easily see that we are not equal. What we really are is not so much equal as unique. Not one of us is the same as anyone else. In this uniqueness is a profound spiritual realization. In this uniqueness is a profound spiritual realization. Life is infinitely creative and requires uniqueness for creativity. Nothing in our internal world or in our external world is the same as what is in anyone else's. Not one cell in our body, or one organ in our body, or one grain of sand, or one blade of grass, or one wildebeest. This understanding, this celebration of individuality allows us to accept the unique aspects of our beinghood. Once they are accepted, we can immediately proceed into the full living of life within the context of the givens. With this in mind, we can understand why holding a single image of God or Spirit can be a profound limitation when we seek to discover the richness of life. For example, my sudden appreciation for polytheism occurred when I realized that in order to catch a glimpse of the essence of God, I needed to be able to recognize the many faces of God. Likewise, for me, to begin to know another person, I must experience many aspects of that person. For me to begin to know myself, I must appreciate many aspects of my own beingness. In this regard, I am reminded of Eleanor Roosevelt's famous statement when she was asked about the purpose of life. Quote, "The purpose of life," she said, "is to live it." And this may involve confronting aspects of ourselves of which we have been unaware or with which we are not comfortable. In early 1986, at one of my foundational conferences, a young man about 30, a truck driver named Steve, raised his hand and shared a powerful experience of inner imagery that he had during a session of high-intensity music in which I played Wagner's The Ride of the Valkyries. Steve hadn't expressed himself up to this point. Several days into the 12-day conference, now describing his inner imagery, he said, quote, "I was coming in for a helicopter landing on some island, like in the film Apocalypse Now. My comrades and I were there to take the beach. I was killing men, women, children with my machine gun. I felt terrific. Physically, I was at my peak. Mentally, I was at my maximum. Spiritually, I felt totally fulfilled. This is what I had come to do, and I was doing it." End quote. There was an awesome silence in the seminar room when he finished, as if someone had forgotten to tell Steve that nice people, particularly spiritual people, and even more particularly sensitive New Age people, want nothing to do with war, killing, and violence, even if it is spiritually fulfilling. But because of the sincerity and the innocence of his presentation, each person in the conference room experienced directly and not through actors in a movie or characters in a book, the warrior self. In the few minutes Steve used to present his raw masculine consciousness, he inducted the men in the room into their own equivalence of the warrior, and he initiated the women into the part of the feminine that is attracted to a powerful masculine. In that moment, Steve was strong, virile, uncomplicated, and completely inspired. He celebrated his warrior self and shared it innocently and openly with us. I later told this story to a group at the Easter retreat. One of the men who had been in the Vietnam War and suffered deep depression afterward got the message. He became immensely excited. As he told us, he had experienced his own warrior during that conflict, though he had no way of dealing with the fact without feeling tremendous guilt and shame over his peak experience of killing during the height of battle. But upon realizing that he could appreciate his warrior self for what it was, his depression suddenly lifted, and he felt redeemed. War is a destructive force that serves life. Human nature in this, its most chaotic eruption, ensures change, the death of that which is to fall away, and the propagation of new life through the warrior. In moments of battle, ordinary values dissolve, and attitudes and beliefs to which the warrior orients become primary. Pain, suffering, destruction, life, death, and sexuality all take on different meaning and importance to the warrior. The major function of the warrior, the only function in time of war, is to fight on a battlefield. Dying in battle is as much a spiritual fulfillment as being victorious. Millions of years transpired during which the warrior meant the difference between survival of a society or its collapse. Now along comes the 20th century, in which our society suddenly demeans a fundamental aspect of itself, the warrior, by disowning it. The important point is that we called hundreds of thousands of warriors forward during the Vietnam War, then failed to give them the status and the honor each deserved. The warrior remains unfulfilled in both our collective consciousness and our collective unconsciousness, and will continue to seek expression until it is released appropriately by the collective. We must appreciate the warrior, or it can turn on both the individuals who carry its forces and the society that invokes its powers. In fact, doesn't the warrior self remind us of immune cells which defend and destroy invaders when called forth, but can also can and do turn against the body? The warrior patterning that becomes ours at conception is activated the moment someone who is actually living the warrior pattern begins to influence us. Boys don't learn to become warriors through military training. They may learn military techniques and survival methods, but they don't learn the warrior state of consciousness. They are inducted into it by inner and outer teachers, inducted to the degree that the warrior self or selves are already present within them. The warrior is innate. It is immortal. It has always been, and it always will be. And the degree to which the warrior itself will manifest in an individual depends on the degree to which the warrior pattern is present in that individual. The biological gender of an individual is not what determines the gender of a psychological self or selves which may be activated. Thus, the warrior self may also be inducted in a woman, though when that occurs, it is not a feminine self. It is a masculine self, experienced in a woman's body and psyche. Women who are particularly attracted to the warrior self often had periods of time during childhood and adolescence when they experienced themselves as tomboys with strong male feelings and attitudes. Sometimes this was an attempt to be a son to the father rather than a daughter, due to feelings that the father preferred sons over daughters. Regardless, the induction of the warrior in a woman is, in my opinion, an example of the activation of a countergender self. Athena may be a woman biologically, but her prowess at times is definitely masculine. After all, she was struck from the head of Zeus, and the Amazons may be female warriors, but they don't think twice about cutting off their right breasts to accommodate the strings of their bows. Indeed, I strongly suspect all warrior women represent the masculine warrior in a feminine body. Induction through saints. The same induction process occurs when an individual who carries a strong saint pattern inducts a devotee into the state of consciousness the saint represents. The devotee doesn't learn to be a saint. He or she is initiated into the state of consciousness that represents the saint, and to a degree that is a function of how much of a saint pattern he or she contains. This may be less than or greater than the degree to which it was present in the initiator, and it is not determined by the individual. It's determined by life and life's needs. Whatever your combination may be, that is your lot. For the induction to take place, the pattern of the initiating spiritual teacher, religious figure, or elder must be close enough to one's own interior pattern of spiritual teacher, religious figure, or elder. The deep psyche reads only the pattern of the forces in the initiator. If there is approximation, the induction occurs. It is also important to understand that relatively few individuals are destined to walk the traditional spiritual path or to be inducted by a spiritual teacher, just as most people who follow a traditional spiritual path will never walk the path of the police officer, the book publisher, the drug czar, the senator, the astronaut, or the CEO. Each of us must fulfill our destiny of our own soul, and the soul finds peace when it accepts its part in the mystery play. This, however, is not to suggest that we have only one part to manifest in our life. The mystery play is very dynamic, constantly changing, calling forth many possibilities from a single individual. We limit ourselves if we fixate on but one possibility. We limit ourselves if we fixate on We limit ourselves if we fixate on but one possibility, no matter how empowering that possibility may be, even if it is sainthood. Religious figures are well known for having the power to induct certain states of consciousness or to stimulate unconscious resources through what they symbolize to the student or devotee. It doesn't matter whether the figure is in the form of a statue, the picture on a wax candle, or an actual person. It doesn't even matter whether the picture or the statue actually portrays the religious figure of whose resources one desires to partake. What is being symbolized is important, not the object being used as the carrier of the symbolized resource. A quaint but powerful example of this is a simple prayer to Saint Anthony that can be used when can be used when a lost object is sought. Dear Saint Anthony, please come around. Something is lost and needs to be found. One enters a sincere reverential state of consciousness and recites the prayer 3 times, substituting the name of the lost object for the word something. Each time the prayer is recited, a deeper state of consciousness is attained. With a final repetition, one has the feeling of having reached a sacred state, of requesting the help of a sacred resource. The trick is to recognize that the forces invoked by the prayer, not one's personal resources, are responsible for finding the object, and then to wait expectantly for the object to turn up, or for its location to be revealed. My experience with this inner ritual is that the object always returns to me. Sometimes within a few minutes, sometimes within several days. In using this simple prayer, I induct within myself what I call the finder. Saint Anthony represents the pattern of knowing how and where to find lost things. That part of one's beingness which knows where everything is in time and space, and functions to reconnect the lost object to the person. The inner equivalent of what Saint Anthony symbolizes is activated in the unconscious of the person with the need, time, and space influenced, and a reunion is effected. Two of my friends, Carolyn Conjure and Michael Hughes, are gifted with inner finders that are able to see the location of any object in time and space, regardless of whether either of them has actually seen the object or knows anything about the person requesting the information. All that is required for their inner sense to be set in motion is that a need be present, or that someone has requested that something be found. They are not 100% accurate, but when they are accurate in this particular demonstration of extended awareness, they are really remarkable. The induction phenomena is also evident for when Carolyn or Michael activate their paranormal resources. Their state of consciousness tends to evoke similar resources in individuals who are in close physical proximity to them. This is why I continue to suggest that people simply hang out with those individuals who manifest ranges of resources they wish to discover within themselves. Sacred places. When I travel in the world, I go to those places which move or quicken something inside of me. Each of us has a particular combination of patterns in the deep psyche that causes us to feel a special affinity for certain cultures, certain historical periods, certain locations, certain civilizations, and certain temples or sacred places, and to be completely uninterested in others. This intuitive attraction can transcend family, ethnic, social, or cultural conditioning. Sometimes it can feel as if one belongs to another and very different ethnic or social grouping than the one into which one was born. I refer to this intuitive attraction to a completely different yet vitally familiar culture or civilization as unconscious vibrational banding. It is as if these bandings or patterns are innate in the deep universal human psyche, like signatures or motifs. Each civilization and each ethnic grouping, past, present, and future, manifests these innate patternings. though in my opinion, they are not contained in time and space, nor in the genetic code of biological inheritance. They are capable of incarnating in generation after generation without regard for social or cultural limitations. Thus, individual reincarnation need not be postulated to account for a sense of familiarity. Something is familiar because a person has inherited one of the great human collective patterns, not because he or she actually lived in a certain civilization or in a certain era, though we may not though we may not be immortal, the patterns are. Of course, traveling to the actual place where you sense a powerful vibrational banding is the option of choice if you seek, through induction, to access the resources it contains. If you do so, you may find the following suggestions valuable. Most important, don't read about the location or ask guides about its significance. Follow your intuition and let it tell you what the location means to you in the deep layers of your beingness. This is how you can access the self or selves that are part of the pattern to which this outer location is equivalent, or nearly enough equivalent to stimulate the deeper inner resources. So-called facts and information about the sacred site or place may not really be why you are attracted to the location in the first place. When people travel with me to the great energy vortices of the world, Machu Picchu, Greece, Egypt, Jerusalem, Lhasa, Stonehenge, Kyoto, Kathmandu, Cambodia, India, Chartres, I ask them to experience the trip functionally rather than factually. Their intention should be to experience the possible induction into profound and rich arenas of their unique individual being, not to verify facts about a place or the people. The same, I may add, is true in regard to the experience of a spiritual teacher. You are not there to verify facts about the teacher. You are there to experience some aspect of yourself. Remarkably, however, photographs can accomplish almost the same inductive process, especially video and film. This is true because your own deep psyche experiences This is true because your deep psyche experiences audio-visual material as if you were actually present at the site. The deep psyche reads only the patterns presented and doesn't quibble about as to whether the pattern is real or not. A good book of photographs or a National Geographic article on the place that quickens you will do just fine. A video or movie is even better, as time and space are presented more naturally. But the best option is to actually travel to the area so that you can enter the three-dimensional hologram and be guided intuitively to places, feelings, thoughts, and aspects that are not necessarily present in a video, a movie, or a photograph. Nevertheless, pictures are an excellent way to begin the induction, especially if you can't afford to world travel at the moment. I begin the journey to a sacred site several weeks before I actually depart, calling forth an image of it in my mind's eye just before falling asleep each evening. I allow myself to be inundated by feelings and impressions of it. Sometimes a dream appears that helps guide my attention to what significance the sacred site has for me individually. All sorts of interior movement are initiated through this technique. When I arrive at the site, I sit quietly at a place to which I have been intuitively led, and in a meditation/prayer state, my purpose for being there, and request permission to enter and to access the resources of realization the site can bring me. My purpose is the same at all the great sacred sites of the world, to fulfill my soul's destiny. I will often present a gift or an offering, something that I have brought specially to the site, such as flowers or a crystal I intend to bury there. Sometimes it's just a wonderful sense of appreciation for the site. Don't ask me why I personify the sacred site by asking its permission. All I know is that when I do, a deeper relationship to the location is somehow established in my mind. When I sense intuitively that permission has been given, I begin to meander and let whatever is going on happen, whatever is going to happen, happen. I have no expectations. I simply open myself to experiencing the location as fully as I am able, through as many dimensions of my being as I am aware. The most amazing experiences occur when I do this, and I am not forcing anything, but merely being open and allowing. Obviously, engaging a sacred site in this fashion takes longer than a standard tourist visit. So I always customize my trips. I allocate ample time, perhaps 5 or 6 days at a major site, or at one that is particularly sacred to me. When I am ready to awaken deep inner resources, I don't want to take the usual commercial quickie tours that involve hearing a 20-minute talk, taking some pictures, getting back on the bus. I arrange for overnight stays if possible. I usually spend the night, even if doing so isn't officially sanctioned, since sleeping in a sacred site is an awesome experience, if it really is one sacred site. I meditate, meander, muse, touch, sing, dance, chant, pray, cry, laugh, letting myself really get into what wants to happen. If one is too cool in quotes, too cool, about being in a sacred place, one may only experience being cool. I let myself be inducted as fully as possible by the forces of the sacred place in order to reach my own sacred place inside. That, after all, is why I came. When the experiences are nearing completion, an intuitive knowingness tells me so, I thank the site and all those forces and beings that attended on all levels. I share the gift of a radiance of love with the site, an offering of my heart center. Then I request permission to leave. Wondrous possibilities may emerge at the great sacred sites of the world when you are not encumbered by information and details, or by convention or regulation. Live your life. Live your life. In some of my seminars, I ask all attendees to bring photographs of a beloved teacher, a loved one, a person who is ill, or someone who has caused them harm or hurt, and a cartoon. My intent is to demonstrate how an image of something is experienced by the deep psyche very differently than it is experienced by the outer awareness. The deep psyche is that part of an individual's unconscious which transcends the personal and blends with the universal collective. My working hypothesis is that images are patterns of interrelating forces, and that the deep psyche is in contact to varying degrees in each individual with a vast collective hologram, as distinct from personal holograms of memory. A vast collective hologram containing every pattern that is, ever has been, or ever shall be manifested in what we call outer reality. Patterns in the deep collective psyche's hologram are not confined by time and space. In order to access the deep psyche's equivalent of a certain image, either a live image we are actually seeing at a certain moment, or a photograph or drawing, seems to be equally effective. The pattern of forces is what is important, not whether the outer mind sees something real or a photograph or a drawing. Then, through accessing expanded, more transcendent levels of conscious awareness, we can tune into the deep psyche's hologram and access its information about the image that we are looking at, information that vastly transcends what is in our outer memory or what we might gather through reasoning. Such information, because it is accessed from the deep psyche's connection to the universal collective hologram, is not confined to time, as is the outer awareness and its informational systems. The deep psyche may therefore reveal information from the past, the present, and the future concerning the image being contemplated. What is more astonishing is that when one has accessed or tuned into the deep psyche's equivalent of a certain image, the individual or object being tuned into can be influenced by the person who is tuning in. And, not surprisingly, the object or individual being tuned into can also influence the individual who is tuning in. This is the theoretical basis of many well-known but often apparently mysterious phenomena, such as distant healing, the ability to favorably influence the outcome of an illness in an individual when the healer is not anywhere near the ill person. So-called voodoo curses, where the individuals are made ill or are caused to die by an individual working with transcendent forces at a distance. Remote viewing, the ability to see objects or events at distances beyond the range of ordinary sight. And telepathy. These are only a few of the awesome possibilities that are explored by individuals who learn to access the resources of the unconscious. The outer mind thinks it is looking at an image or a photograph in a certain moment, but the deep psyche is working with patterns that operate both in time and space and out of time and space. The process of accessing and using transcendental states has many names. It can be called a reading or channeling. The process may be referred to as psychic, intuitive knowing, getting information from higher sources, or receiving transmissions. And its mode of representation and its mode of presentation to the person in the heightened state can be in the form of voices, images, visions, direct realizations, dreamlike pictures, with sound, automatic writing, and physical body manifestations, such as pain occurring in the heart area of the reader when the person who has been tuned into is having a heart attack. Sometimes the mode of presentation may have overlays in which one is looking at an image and then another image is superimposed over the original. Both images are seen simultaneously. This can also be accompanied by further information in the form of voice commentary or direct realization. All combinations are possible. What I am presenting here, incidentally, is merely a contemporary version of what has been explored in mystery trainings throughout the world for thousands of years. It's hardly new. What is new, however, is for the techniques to be made available to individuals who do not have the slightest idea what mystery training is about, and probably couldn't care less. My intention is to inspire individuals who operate mostly at ordinary levels of consciousness to seek and to explore the vastness of what it means to have existence and consciousness. The patterns behind telepathy. The ability to obtain information from interior sources, other than ordinary senses of self, is an extraordinary development. In the area of telepathic rapport, Carolyn Conger, with whom I have lived and creatively explored a number of ranges of awareness, has, in my presence, most consistently demonstrated her abilities in all of these areas under all sorts of circumstances through the years. As a result of some remarkable experiences with Carolyn, I first began to suspect that there was more to language communication than just the linguistic components. For example, she can be with Hopi people or with Eskimos and still be in clear telepathic rapport, though she knows no Hopi nor any of the languages of the Eskimo peoples. The person speaking may not know English, but Carolyn receives the impression in English. This suggests to me that there is a universal pattern level of communication beneath the world level of language. Language, in addition to being word patterns, is also energy patterns in the form of sound that carry the force of the intended impression. Now, language, in addition to being word patterns, is also energy patterns in the form of sound that carry the force of the intended expression. In fact, linguists have maintained that communication with just words, inflections, and tone changes is impossible. Linguists have maintained that communication with just words, inflections, and tone changes is impossible. They maintain that something must be going on in addition to what we encounter at the auditory level. We have the feeling that we are speaking spontaneously. Yet, the infrastructure of our consciousness, before it delivers up even the simple sentence, has combined and associated the material in ways and to degrees that are beyond our wildest imagination. Truly, we are but extremely limited witnesses to profound mysteries. Most people, upon first coming into contact with the notion of telepathy, think only in terms of the mental areas, someone else's thoughts. There are, however, many other areas of telepathic rapport, and some individuals are telepathic in more than one mode of consciousness. For instance, Carolyn is able to be in telepathic rapport at mental, emotional, and physical levels with an individual. This is true whether she is near the individual or at a distance, and it is not a function of whether or not she knows the person. One can be telepathic at the emotional levels and immediately have hits and impressions about someone else that reflect emotional disturbances in that individual. Through this kind of telepathic rapport, one can read the deeper aspects of the individual. So even if he or she is feeling happy in a particular moment, one can be picking up patterns or selves of that person that are not happy and in fact may be enraged, but are not expressing through the body at that time. Unless we have a sense that we are both in the moment and through time, multiply and mostly unconscious of our many parts, we can't possibly understand what is happening when a sensitive picks up unhappiness, anger, or other emotional pain that is being expressed on different levels, though the conscious mind is not aware of it. One can be telepathic in regard to sexuality. Individuals who are telepathic sexually have usually run an availability check on every person who is attractive to them. They know when others are sexually attracted to them, even if they are being ignored or rejected at outer levels. One can also be telepathic at the physical or body level and know the physical status of any individual, even to the point of being able to diagnose problems or of knowing where pain or disease are located or what injuries have taken place. An image, photograph, object of a person, an image we engage with our conscious mind acts as a witness. An image we engage with our conscious mind acts as a witness, an esoteric term describing something that is related to a target. So witness is in quotes, target is in quotes, okay. An image we engage with our conscious mind acts as a witness, an esoteric term describing something that is related to a target, an individual or thing about which we seek expanded understanding. The witness helps to direct and focus access to the deep psyche's equivalent of the target individual or thing. The witness could be an object worn by the target, hair from that individual, or anything else associated with that person or thing. Pictures of a guru or beloved teacher can be used to maintain a deep connection to the forces these individuals symbolize when that physical person is either at a distance or no longer incarnated. Regular meditation on or contemplation of statuary, an image, drawing, or personal article of the beloved teacher has the power to induct. Anything the teacher owns or has worn or touched will do. Listening to the voice of the teacher is another remarkable way to tap the forces of the revered individual. Hearing the unique voice qualities of the teacher when he or she is in a heightened state inducts one as powerfully as if the teacher were present and speaking directly. Remember, it is not the words or the thought content that are important, nor is the image important. It is the forces behind the sound or the image that are important. Thus, photographs can be appreciated as far more than just photographs. Images can be appreciated as far more than just images. Objects can be appreciated as far more than just objects. People who collect autographs or memorabilia are involved with these principles. So is the church when it maintains bone fragments of saints. The Muslim religion with its preservation of a sandal of Muhammad. The Tibetan Buddhists when they encase the sealed body of a truly great Lama in gold. And the American Indians when they maintain a feather or the skin of an animal as a totem. Just carrying pictures in our wallets of those we love involve the same principles. Placebos and sacrifices. The powerful unconscious interplay between the object and the observer is not merely intellectual, and is the reason there is such a thing as a placebo effect. There is a dimension of awareness in each of us that we can actually tap the forces behind the object, bringing to us certain resources that are unavailable through only the outer mind. Placebos are powerful because the deep psyche reads their patterns, whether the patterns are those of the physical form or those of the accompanying information, i.e., a suggestion that pure water is actually a chemotherapeutic agent. And here is the real mystery. The unconscious, if it believes that the placebo is what it is represented to be, will respond to the placebo as though it contains the forces that are in whatever it represents. In other words, the placebo is a surrogate, a close enough approximation of the actual object or function that the forces behind external manifestation respond as if the placebo were the actual object or function. Let me read that sentence again. In other words, the placebo is a surrogate, a close enough approximation of the actual object or function that the forces behind the external manifestation respond as if the placebo were the actual object or function. The Shroud of Turin is a good example. This cloth with the Christ-like image, which has been venerated by the faithful for centuries, is close enough in patterning for the unconscious to respond as if it were the actual burial shroud of Christ, whether it really is or not. The deep psyche only reads patterns and is not concerned about the genuineness of the object. This accounts for the power of the whole spectrum of substitution responses, including the phenomenal forces and experiences behind substitution sacrifices. The stage is set for a substitution sacrifice when a situation calls for death. This can happen when a person is dealing with a life-threatening illness or is preparing to walk on a particularly dangerous high mountain pass. It is seen in eye-for-eye situations when the death of a leader, whether through illness, accident, or actual killing by the enemy, requires the death of another person to balance the forces of the pattern. It is seen in the Christianing patterning, where for redemption to transpire, a death is called for. It is seen in the Judaic patterning at Passover, where the death of the firstborn son has been called for. It is experienced where two deaths have already occurred and a third death is necessary to complete the pattern. Among the early peoples of the Pacific Northwest, there are stories in which a perfect stranger, just happening along, would become a substitution sacrifice to balance the forces surrounding the death of an important person in the tribe or clan. In the Christian mystery, the son is sacrificed for the sins of the collective. In the Passover ceremony, the lamb is sacrificed in place of the firstborn son. So when the angel of death passes by, it will know a death has occurred when it sees the blood of the lamb over the portal. In the tradition of folk wisdom, a chicken or goat may be sacrificed in place of the person who is very ill and about to die. Death is called for, though not the death of the particular person. The deeper forces that lie behind manifest reality are impersonal and respond to the balancing of patterns. Substitution sacrifice is one of the most powerful ways humanity assuages the gods, which, from my viewpoint, are simply impersonal patterns of energy in a suchness of being. All of what appears to us to be events are organized by unconscious patterns, dancing in time and space, and we can satisfy or fulfill a pattern by creating an event that completes it. This brings us to the rich arena of television, movies, and theatrical drama. In the late 1970s, I spent several weeks in Los Angeles at the home of my intuitive and gifted friend, Michael Hughes. I was feeling the need to open certain psychic areas, and Michael displayed the range of consciousness to which I wanted to find equivalents in myself. I knew that just hanging out with people who carry the desired aspect and being very open and receptive when the individual is expressing it are all that is required. Early one morning, as we were completing our time of meditation together, Michael suddenly announced that the big California earthquake was going to happen that day. He described huge forces beneath California pushing and straining, and the terrible collapse of buildings and bridges. I had been around Michael enough to know that his accuracy in such matters was not good. What disturbed me, however, was that I also had the impression of an earthquake, though I had dismissed it. But when Michael started talking about the quake, I felt different. Intuitively, I sensed that an earthquake was going to occur. It felt close. Following the meditation, I quietly slipped into his office and called my insurance agent to get earthquake coverage on some personal property that I could little afford to have crumble into a big heap. I then went on with the day's activities. Not that I ignored the warning, as I did stay out of tall buildings, and I kept in mind that the big one might occur, but I didn't feel fear or panic. Later in the evening, midway through a board meeting I was attending, I abruptly announced that I had to leave. I had remembered that the film Superman opened in Los Angeles that very day, and seeing the film felt as though it would be far more enriching than what was going on in that board meeting. I excitedly rushed off to Mann's Chinese Theater in Hollywood. As I was entering the theater with a mob of others, I saw Michael in the crowd leaving the theater. He did not see me. I hadn't known exactly what the film was about, and to my great surprise, there was a whole sequence in which the long-anticipated California earthquake was precipitated by a nuclear bomb released by the bad guys. There was a really massive earthquake with huge landmass movements. The Golden Gate Bridge collapsed, well-known buildings crumbled. I suddenly began laughing. Here was the California earthquake Michael and I had sensed in our meditations. I repeat, the deep psyche reads only the patterns and not whether they are outer or inner events, not whether they are real or not. This film presents a most fascinating situation in that the eyes and the ears experience a movie event as real. To all who are watching the film, the earthquake is happening. In my meditation, the deep psyche had been reading a future event that was transpiring only in the awareness of the film's audience and not actually taking place in outer reality. God only knows what the Japanese monster films of the 1950s and 60s and their latest batch of world wipeouts by American film companies are doing and what they did to the consciousness of someone such as Nostradamus. When an event can be viewed by literally billions of people, either simultaneously or on occasions that are relatively near to one another in time, what must be happening in the deep psyche? I have often wondered if the film Earthquake, which is specifically about the California earthquake striking Los Angeles, didn't in some unexpected way act as a substitution sacrifice by which the earth forces that had been building for years might somehow have been influenced so that an earthquake did not need to manifest. Of course, this would mean that there is an extraordinary and unrecognized connection between mind and matter, a connection far more radical than that which is currently being explored, merely in terms of mind-body relationships. It may therefore be that films which show some awesome destruction and chaos somehow satisfy the dark side of the mystery. I find it important to note, for instance, that the United States produces a greater number of horror, violence, and sex films than any other nation in the world, sometimes with all three elements combined in a single film. However, at the outer level, the level of the mask, our society doesn't even let Little Red Riding Hood get eaten by the wolf, which happens in the original European version. We profess anti-war sentiments, and sex is a sacred act only to be experienced in the context of marriage. I wonder Are the films of horror, violence, and sex stimulating the expression of such behavior in people, as is commonly believed, or is the deep psyche seeing them as a substitution, sacrifice, and therefore being satisfied and brought into a more harmonious balance as masses of people are exposed to the disowned aspects being depicted? These are profound questions which emerge when one begins to appreciate a different perspective of human reality and the power the deep human psyche may have over events. When we take this kind of overview, we can clearly see the schizophrenic behavior of our society in its collective form. We are willing to pay money to experience vicariously what we are not willing to allow in our day-to-day reality. Further, from the perspective I have been presenting, the person who exemplifies only the positive pole of duality and denies its opposite is involved with creating that opposite polarity and its eruption into physical reality, whether their eruption occurs in that individual's home or as violence and chaos in another part of the world. We must not forget that we are all in this together, and that duality and its consequences are aspects of life's wholeness. And that concludes Chapter 4. Chapter 5 is entitled Induction, from Inner Imagery to Group Meditation.